Welcome back, lads. All aboard the hype train. Spoiler season for the new 11th edition Warhammer 40K is in full swing, and we've got lots of spicy rules changes to discuss about today. A lot of these are official ones that G-Dub's been going over, both in their live reveal trailer, as well as some things they've been going over in the articles lately. But a good amount of it is going to be rumored rules changes. The rumor mill's been working overtime lately in terms of what's going to happen to the game here in the next couple months. And from the sounds of it, G-Dub has been working very closely with them big tournament circuits like WTC, UKTC, and all them gits to try to make the game as best as they possibly can for the upcoming edition. So as a result, there's a lot of gits who already have a pretty good idea about what the game's going to play like come June when the new box comes out. So, them's are some things that I'd like to discuss with you lads today. So with that, let's hop into it. So, first up we'll go over what they showed in that live reveal trailer. I did this a little bit in my reaction video towards the end of it, but I've had some time to think about some things, and I'll go over them here. So first up, they claim that there will be a unified experience. Every battle will be more narrative, and every battle will be more balanced. Meaning that 10th edition, as it is currently, is quite bland, according to the opinions of many a git who's been playing this game for a long time. They feel that a lot of the missions, a lot of the battles you play with your lads, end up being who can stand on the circles in the middle of the board better than the other git. So G-Dub's looking to spice things up and make it to where we can go back to the old days of cinematic narrative experiences in each of your Warhammer games. So I for one am all for it, but when the question of thematics and narrative come into play, usually that comes at the expense of a well-balanced strategy type game that a lot of other gits tend to prefer. So I'm definitely interested to see how this shakes out, and judging by the rest, some of the rules they got coming up, seems like they might be heading in a good, or at least somewhat decent, way. Alright, so they mentioned in the vid that there's going to be 70 new detachments on day one for all the different armies in the game. Now this is nice, because since they also confirmed that your codex from 10th will be ported over to 11th, with all of your rules more or less staying the same. That was a relief to a lot of gits, meaning that, oh great, that means I don't have to go out and buy a new index or codex right away. I can still use my new book that I may or may not have gotten within the past couple months or past couple years. But other gits went, well, that's talking crap. You know, I bought my old codex almost 3 years ago, and it's been nerfed into the ground multiple times, to where now the only viable option for me to play is Warhorde. And now you're telling me with the new 11th edition coming out, I'm still only going to be playing Warhorde? You know, some gits have that kind of sentiment. But to help out with that, seems like with 70 new detachments, that means every army in the game, ideally, should be receiving at least 2 detachments apiece. Now, with armies like Orcs, who already have close to, I believe, 10 detachments now, that fit every single aspect of the army, from speed freaks to freebooters to blood axes to goths, snake bites, all them different gits. I am kind of running out of ideas as to what other detachments they could give us, but more detachments means more rules, and more rules means more options for you to play your gits on the tabletop. So this is always going to be very welcome. But on the flip side, you have armies like Chaos Marines and Space Marines who are getting up to like the 20s, maybe even 30s in terms of the amounts of detachments that those gits can take. And, you know, back in 9th edition, we worried about rules bloat, with so many armies having access to all these different loads of different abilities, and as an opponent, it made it very difficult to remember which was which. And this kind of adds to that rule bloat. So it could backfire on them by just piling on more and more options. But we'll have to see. Next up, they say there's a new modular detachment system, so this goes along with said new detachments. So they bring up in the video, so this is for people who love Terminators and bikes, meaning that you can run your Deathwing Terminators and your Ravenwing Bikers and take abilities from individual detachments and use them in one kind of hybrid detachment. So as an orc player, you could say, take the Dread Mob detachment rule and combine it with your Tactical Brigade detachment rule and run it in the same army. Now, can you run them two specific ones together? Who knows, but it seems like that is kind of the sentiment as to what they want to do. Now, as a spoiler, they did kind of go over this later in one of the little documents that they posted on the community page, which I do have here coming up. But as a baseline, seems like this is going to be a lot more flavorful, just give you more options, especially as a casual player, for those who have a certain thematic in mind for their army, where, yeah, I'm the git who likes to run the walkers and the bikers, and I want to run both of them. I love me Death Dreads, I love me War Bikers. How come there isn't a detachment that benefits both Death Dreads and War Bikers? That isn't something generic, like, again, like a War Horde. Well, these rules are apparently going to be for gits like that. So I'm excited to see what happens here. Next up is objectives, the big circle objective markers that everybody's come to know, love, and or hate from 10th edition are going away completely. No more. And that has been confirmed. No more big circle mats. Now, objectives are going to be terrain based. And that's interesting because not only is it like a narrative change, like, oh, I don't want to go stand on the big circle on the ground. I'd rather say, oh, my gits are trying to take over this big building, this big ruined building, and hold that strategic location to score my points in the game. It feels a lot more thematic, a lot more narrative, and it gives you a better game feel when you're playing on the table. But when it comes to terrain, ruins, templates, all them other gits on the table, I'm interested to see if said terrain features are going to be well defined, or if it's kind of loosey-goosey. For example, at my local game store, they have the typical G-dub templates that you see nowadays in 10th edition, but they also have these big terrain pieces made for these very large narrative boards that we used to all use in 9th edition and prior, before 10th edition came along and made everything an L-shaped ruin. But say you pull out, like one of them's like this big, I think it's one of them old Sky Shield landing pads. It's on a giant template, it's all deserty theme, it's got some AdMech bits all over it. Looks really zogging cool, but it's a very big piece. So if you slap that on the middle of the table and say, alright, that's the middle objective, like, I want to know if there's any rules stating what the size of the building needs to be. Because if you have to run inside this building with your lads in such a big terrain feature, you're going to be able to be seen within that terrain from anywhere else on the table. Or on the flip side, say you're using a terrain piece that is a complete closed off box, like it's a bastion or a castle or something like that. You can run inside of it, but then no gits can see you when you're inside. You know, terrain's really goofy and it's very modular, which is why I'm hesitant when they say that those are going to be your main objectives. Like, does this make vehicles worse? Because vehicles are very difficult to maneuver around terrain. Are you not going to be able to tow vehicles into objective markers anymore? Who knows? Ah, yeah, and this is another one. So, if objectives are changing to terrain features, then it's going to require some rules clarifications, because there's a lot of gits in lots of different armies, like here, the Cavalite Warriors from Drukhari, and then the Necron Immortals. So both of them gits have the main ability being that they get reroll wounds versus units on objectives. Now, it does say objective markers specifically, so is that just going to change to objective piece, objective terrain, terrain objective, something like that? Or are these units going to have different abilities altogether? So, you see what I mean? It's nice that we're getting our rules ported over, but I feel like some things are going to need to be clarified with these new rule changes. So, interested to see what happens there for sure. Our next up is no stratagem stacking. So they mentioned in the reveal trailer, or rather the Adepticon preview live stream failure, audio mess, whatever it was, is that they don't want any more big combo units being used. They want your units to be strong because the unit is strong, not because you blasted 3 CP and made a typical ordinary unit into a big mega death kill ball for one phase of the game. They specifically call out if you're in the charge phase and you fail a charge, and you have to use a CP reroll to make it into combat. That means you then couldn't also tank shock in that same charge move. So I wonder if the stratagem stacking means there'll be limitations on how many stratagems you can use on a unit per phase, or if it will be per turn. You know, meaning, oh, if you use a strat to give them lethals in the shooting phase, you can't then charge that unit into combat and use the same stratagem to give them lethals in the fight phase. That's not exactly stratagem stacking, I'd say, but you get to know what I mean. What's the limitation here? I'm very interested to see what something like this might mean. Next up is Stay Hidden. So this is one of the biggest changes, at least at face value, that a lot of gits are talking about. So it says here, I know I'm blocking it a bit, but it says it's now much easier to hide units that have not yet joined the fight. So they say in the reveal that if use has a unit inside a terrain feature that has not shot yet in the game, then they cannot be targeted unless the unit trying to shoot them gits is within 15 inches. So basically meaning any unit that has not yet fired a gun in the game has lone op 15 inches, which at face value is really zogging impactful. First thing I think of is indirect weapons. Does indirect just not work anymore? You know, if you're a guard player, one of your biggest downfalls is that if there was a unit entrenched in a building, it's very difficult for them guard boys to get that unit out of the building or kill the unit from inside the building. They don't have melee units that can just charge into the building and clear whatever's in there. And with lots of ruins being very concealing, even now in 10th edition, it's very difficult to move your shooting units into an angle to be able to hit them gits. So typically what guard players will do is use artillery. Say, oh, well, you're gonna hide in that building in the back. No worries, I got my artillery team here, or me mortars, or basilisks, or whatever it is. I'm just gonna pelt them gits from down line, because at that point it doesn't matter whether you use hide or not. But with this new stay hidden rule, seems like you can't do that. But granted, we don't know what the verbatim rule is, so take this with a grain of salt, of course. There might be a limitation. This might literally just be turn 1. You can't be shot unless you've shot already. I know why they did this, because I'm imagining, you know, say, like with this rule, you can go back to the days of 7th and 8th edition, where you take your big squad of 10 to 15 looters, you stick them on the second floor story of a ruin, on a rooftop somewhere, and they just sit there and just fire down range for the whole game. So what this means is you can go back to doing that, and then your looter squad is going to be guaranteed to get at least one round of shooting off, because even if you gits don't go first, your looters aren't going to get shot off the top of that roof turn 1 anymore due to the stay hidden rule. I think that's why they did it. You know, for the last cannon teams, the heavy weapon squads, the looters, all them other long range infantry type gits that can't really take too much of a beating. But again, what's the limitation? With current GW terrain boards, or WC terrain boards in fact, because them gets way more dense in WTC boards, if you just hide your whole army all in buildings on them big templates, can your opponent just not shoot you? And if there isn't a limitation saying, oh, only turn 1, then what about like just combat units in general? You know, say you're running twin kill saw meganobs. If you're doing that, then your meganobs don't have any guns, so they can't shoot. So does that mean they just always have lone op 15? Or is it only going to be turn 1? Or does it turn off if yous get engaged in melee? Who knows? If you're running regular knobs, you go, oh, well, they've got pistols, but I'm just going to opt to not shoot them so that way I can keep my stay hidden rule. You lads know what I mean? It's interesting, very interesting. This is a huge shakeup regardless whether it's just turn 1 or if it is for the full game. So I'm very excited to see what this full rule is going to be. Alright, next they say that combat's been cleaned up. They mention fast dice rolling. So in the reveal they mention that what they mean by fast dice rolling effectively means that you can roll all of your dice at the same time in combat, at least per profile. So if you run in some boys, you can roll all your choppers at the same time, then you can roll all your power claw hits at the same time, and just go about your business. Effectively what everybody's been doing in this game anyways, but apparently current 10th edition rules as written in the book is that, at least in terms of melee, you are technically supposed to roll your dice one at a time, which obviously nobody ever does, but I guess it's just a wording change. I have, however, seen some gits online saying that this fast dice rolling change means that wound allocation is going to be different, and then that got gets thinking, oh, well, maybe they're going to bring over pooling wounds, like from Age of Sigmar. So if you've got a 3 damage Thunderhammer, and you're swinging in combat against 1 wound infantry, if you get a wound through, you're going to kill 3 gits instead of just 1 git taking the full 3 damage. That's what some gits are saying. Now, I'm inclined to not believe this. I believe what they mean by wound allocation and fast dice rolling is literally just changing the wording of the rule to what all of the players do nowadays anyways, just to try to speed the game up. Because I found G-Dub kind of does this every edition. They go, hey lads, there's too many models on the table. Games take too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to put all of these new rules and different processes into effect to make it to where the game doesn't take as long. And they do, that does work at the beginning. But then as the edition goes on and gets older in age, either army points go down, meaning you can run more models, which therefore means more units, which therefore means more activations, which therefore means takes more time. So yeah, I definitely think that's what the dice rolling means. Next up is combat activation. So they mentioned that the fights first rule is changing a bit. So if you make a charge move, your unit gains the fights first ability. That's staying the same. But the difference is, say, use charging into an enemy unit that also has fights first. When the current rules, if both armies have fights first units, then the players alternate activating in combat, starting with the defending player, as in the player who is not currently taking their turn. The change to activation is going to be the same, where if you both got fights first units, you take turns doing said fights first units in combat, but in this case, the active player now gets to swing first. And this is huge, because usually you'll run into feels bad moments where you charge your gits in on 3 different flanks, you've got 4 different units that all made charges this turn, and then your opponent goes, alright gits, when it comes to the fight phase, I've got fights first, so I'm going to kick the crap out of your boys before you can even do anything. And you have to sit there and go, well, it's either I didn't charge them gits, or I just eat them fighting me first, so that way the rest of me boys can come in and get their crumping in on the other units. Now, you don't have a feels bad option like that. It does, however, make the fights first rule not quite as impactful, meaning that if your opponent only has 1 fights first unit, say they've got 1 big blade guard brick with a Judicia, and you're charging them gits, plus a intercessor squad and an assault intercessor squad, you as the active player go, alright, well if you've only got 1 fights first unit, I'm just going to fight that unit first, hopefully kill them, and then I don't have to worry about you hitting me back, unless you want to break in or something for 2 CP. So really, the fights first keyword now only matters if you have more than 1 fights first unit that also happens to be locked in combat at the same time. So basically, if you's not them Emperor's Children gits, you don't have to worry about this anymore. Which you could see as unfortunate, but I think overall it's a good change. Next, they mention piling and consolidate, so they don't explicitly state how this is changing, but they mention that all your units pile in at once and then they all consolidate at once, which would be unfortunate. Now, I feel like I know where they did it. It's because they tried to eliminate them weird extra movement shenanigans that some gits would do with the pile and consolidate moves. So for instance, say a World Eater player is playing into Imperial Guard. there's a Lehman Russ, and in front of the Lehman Russ is like 10 guardsmen. And the Word Eater player is like, well, I want to go crump that Lehman Russ, but I gotta get rid of these guardsmen in the way first. So what they do is they charge the guardsmen with, say, a squad of 8-bound and a squad of berserkers. And they would activate the berserkers first, so they would then pile in, kick the crap out of the guardsmen, and hopefully kill the entire squad. Then what would happen is the 8-bound squad, who also charged those guardsmen, because they made a successful charge move that turn, means they are still eligible to fight. And being eligible to fight means that you can select them to then do their pile in, their fights, and then their consolidates. So if the 8-bound activate and the guardsmen are no longer alive, then those 8-bound can pile in 3 inches towards the nearest unit, and if that is enough distance to get them into melee or engagement range, they can then fight onto whatever unit they just pile into. So if the Lehman Russ happens to be within 4 inches of these gits, they move 3, get within an inch, and then they fight the Russ and potentially kill it. So that's kind of a tactic that melee-specific armies will use in order to maximize the amount of damage they can do in the combat phase. But if this new way of piling in and consolidate works like how they say it is, and that every unit piles in at the same time, that means you can't do any maneuvers like that anymore. And in my opinion, this is kind of annoying, because it means, say you're fighting on like 3 different flanks. Again, say you're playing orcs, you have Ghazi and a bunch of boys that charged in on the left objective. You've got a 10-pack of knobs with a war boss charging on the right objective. And then you had Mega Knobs, or we'll say Storm Boys. You had Storm Boys deep strike in the opponent's backfield and made their charge. So you already had to move to 3 different spots of the table to get your charge moves off and move all your gits in. But now, you go to the combat step, you have to go to 3 different spots on the table, pile in everything, then do your fights, go around all 3 spots of the table, then do your consolidates all at the same time, move around all 3 parts of the table, and you're just splitting up all your different activations individually, which is quite annoying. When I go to do my combats and I'm playing the game, I go, alright, Gaz's unit's fighting. I go select them, they're going to punch these gits. Pile in 3, alright, how many gits are in range to fight them? This many gits, cool, roll my dice, do the wounds, take the models, alright, combat's over here. Gaz and his gits are going to consolidate 3 inches, move around, shuffle around a little bit, all good. Alright, now let's go to this half of the table where my next unit's going to do the same thing. You know what I mean? You have individual little things that you're doing that you can finish and then don't worry about it again. If you split up the pile and consolidates that all happen at the same time, then I feel like gits are just going to forget to do one of those things, like probably consolidate. They'll say, them gits on your side of the table, yeah, they could consolidate, but I don't want to because then I have to move over there, and I was already over there twice getting in your face, so don't worry about it. So interested to see how that changes. But the biggest quality of life change is the charge measuring. So then Gits mentioned that if you have multiple charge targets, you can now see what you can roll and see what your charge distance is first before declaring what unit you're going to charge into. So this is a big quality of life update, meaning that there's no more feels bad split charges versus long bomb charges, all that other whatnot. You say you're playing a game and you've got a squad of intercessors 5 inches away from you, but behind the intercessors off to the corner, there's a dreadnought or something, like a ballistus dreadnought. And you're a pack of knobs, and you're like, well, I'd really like to go crump that ballistus, but that's like a 10-inch charge. I don't believe in myself to make that, and I don't want to just be stuck out in the open if I fail, so I'm just going to take the easy charge into the intercessors and just call it a day. Well, now, with the way they changed it, you can now roll first, and say you got the 10, you're like, oh, great, alright, well, I'm going to charge the ballistus instead. Just cuts down on the feels bad, which I love this change, because I've been saying for multiple editions now, the most impactful, most important roll in the game is the charge roll, because it's the biggest make or break damage roll. It's the difference between your gits making it to combat and kicking the crap out of whatever unit you're trying to get rid of. versus them sitting around doing fuck all and doing absolutely zero damage. With a shooting unit, you know, you can move out as long as you can see them, you can shoot them, and say you whiff on your attacks, it's like, alright, well, at least I had the chance to attack them. Maybe I only killed 1 or 2 gits versus 5 or 6, which is what I really wanted to do and wipe the unit, but at least I got to do some chip wounds off of them. In combat, you just gotta run out into the open, hope you make that charge, because if you don't, again, you're doing no damage, and odds are you're out of position, and you get to standing around with the thumbs up their asses, looking like a bunch of idiots, ready to eat all of the lead. The opponent will serve them up on a fucking dinner platter in the next turn. So yeah, charge measuring, love it. Next up is Combat Disembark. So this is another quality of life change. This is to try to remove the feels bad gameplay of rap and tapping is what gets in the competitive community call it. And that is, effectively, it's abusing the fact that transports are typically very small in size. Like as you see here, you've got a Rhino and you've got Berserkers. So if you've got World Eaters, you can place 10 Berserkers with a character for 11 total kits inside a Rhino. If I'm playing my Orcs, I'm like, alright, well, I'm going to charge my 10 boys into this Rhino. Now, even though I'm probably not going to kill it, because the only thing that can effectively even scratch the paint is going to be the Power Claw, which only has 3, maybe 4 swings. But I'm not using these boys to kill this tank, I'm just using them to keep it in place, and more importantly, prevent the Berserkers from inside hopping out. Because when you disembark from a vehicle, every model in your unit has to end wholly within 3 inches of the transport. Well, if you got a bunch of gits sitting in front of you, it's physically impossible for your gits to do that. And as a result, you might have to do something like an emergency disembarkation, which means you have to hop out within 6 inches, so double the distance, but you now have to do rolls that are associated with this, and I think it's on 1s and 2s you take mortal wounds on your gits. But sometimes, you might not even be able to do that. Say you get charged by a 20 mob of gits with gas or something. Or maybe not gas, because gas would just flip the tank. Maybe it's a 20-man boy brick with a pain boy and a war boss. Now, 20 gits, all surrounding a Rhino, could probably make it to where Berserkers could not hop out even within 6 inches off an emergency disembarkation. So instead of these gits just either staying in their vehicle or just straight up dying because they can't be placed, now they can hop out into combat. What the full extent of that means, they didn't really say. They said that there is still going to be a risk associated with doing this, and then I don't know if that means that they can immediately fight or if they have to wait and then the defender gets to fight first. I don't know about that, but this as an extra rule to have in your back pocket, as before, again, you might go, oh, well, I've got an emergency disembark, or oh, I guess my gits just died because my Rhino blew up and there's physically no spots for me to place these lads. That, yeah, that sucks. Well, now you've got a better option, or just an additional option. So always good to have. Alright, next up is leaders always lead. So we touched on this last time. So basically what this means is your leader characters, if their bodyguard unit dies, they still get the benefits of having, as if they are leading a unit. So Pain Boys, for example, they get a 5-up Fiona Pain for the whole unit if they are leading a unit. Well, now, with the new 11th edition rules, you can run a Pain Boy with, you know, your knobs or your boys or whatever, and if the boys die and it's just the Pain Boy by himself, well, he still gets the 5-up Feel No Pain now. So it's very nice. Again, it just makes it to where your leaders don't lose out on a bunch of their rules just because their gits got shot up. Again, quality of life stuff. And then I have in here a little blurb from one of the articles that came out either yesterday or the day before. So it says here, as an aside, characters that join units will now be designated either leader or support. So this is another thing. There's different categories of characters, and a unit can have one of each attached to it. Some armies could do this before with special rules, such as Space Marine Apothecaries, or like Boys and Orcs. And now it cleans it up for everybody. You also pick which units they join and when you build your list rather than at the start of the game, which, let's be honest, most of us were doing anyways. So this means a few things. So first up, you pick which units they join when you build your list. So it means there's no more swapping what your leaders are doing every game. So if you have a war boss leading 20 boys, you have to have that war boss lead those 20 boys. You do it in your army configuration. You don't show up to a game and then say, oh, alright, well, if my opponent's taking Assassinate as a fixed objective, well, instead of running my war boss with my boys, I'm just going to throw him in reserve all game, and then just, I don't know, deep strike him in my backfield at some point, so that way he just doesn't die, and I therefore block my opponent from Assassinate points. No more doing that. If you bring a Git and you put them with a unit, they've got to stay there. And then the leader/support units joining the same unit. So I believe, yeah, this just means any unit works like boys now. Because boys, you can have 2 characters attached to boys, as long as one of them's a war boss. So you can do a war boss and a pain boy, a war boss and a big mech, but you cannot do a pain boy and a big mech, because those are both seemingly support gits, versus the bosses are the true leaders of the army. So this is interesting, because again with the lads, that means you can run a 10-man knob squad with both a war boss and a pain boy. Now that's going to be a zog load of points, but the war boss giving them gets -1 to wound, +1 to hit, and the war boss being a big beatstick himself, coupled with a pain boy giving all them gets 5 Inferno Pains and bringing back D3 knobs once per game. That's a really good unit. It's like a 400-point unit, but it's a good unit. So this adds a lot more interest and complexity when you're building your lists. You know, you can throw 2 characters in with looters or flash kits. Don't know if that'll do you any good, but you can do it. Experiment with it. Try it out. I know I will. Alright, more confirmed rule changes. These are some bits that, some stuff that they went over in the articles that they've been posting on the community site. So first up, army building rules are changing. So this has to do with those new detachments and their new modular detachment system. So as you can see on the left here, there's a table that says, for instance, in Strike Force battles, which is your typical 2k points, you get 3 detachment points. So you can run multiple detachments in your army, with each one costing a certain amount of points. And how many points they cost depends on what the rule for said detachment is. They said specifically that if it's a detachment that only buffs certain small aspects of an army, odds are that will only cost 1 or 2 points. And then other detachments that affect large groups of a codex or every unit in a codex, those will probably cost 2 or 3. So for the orcs, Warhorde for example, which gives sustained hits to every orc unit, that will probably be 3 detachment points. Versus something like Dreadmob, which only affects mechs, walkers, and grot vehicles. Those are specific units that are affected, so that might cost 1 or a 2. So that's what I'm saying. Perhaps you could combine something like Dreadmob that affects, again, walkers, grot vehicles, and mech units, and run that, as well as a Cult of Speed detachment that affects only Cult of Speed keyworded units, or Speed Freaks keyworded units specifically. You can run both of them gets together. Enhancement limit says here you get 4 for a 2,000 point game, and you can, I'm assuming, grab those from any of those detachment use running. And then the unit limit is your typical rule of 2, rule of 3 in this case for 2,000 points. You can't have more than 3 of the same unit in your army construction unless it is a battle line unit. So for us that'd be Orc Boys, for example. You can have 6 Orc Boy units, but only 3 Flash Kit units, or 3 Storm Boy units, because there's not battle line. And then over here they got the Force Dispositions. So this is a big change up coming with the new edition. So each detachment that you select to play with has one of these dispositions associated with them, meaning that, for instance, like Warhorde, which typically wants to get up in your opponent's face and crump them to bits, might be a Purge the Foe coded detachment, versus something like Tactics Brigade, which is meant to be a little bit more cagey, a lot more tricks, not as in your face, punch you to death, that might be either a reconnaissance coded or maybe even a disruption coded detachment. Now, these will matter for how you play your games in terms of what missions you do, and we'll talk about that later. Just know that that is a very big shakeup. That'll be very important with 11th edition. Yes, and then they said here in the article that says, you might be thinking, hold on, what if that swanky new detachment features a unit type that doesn't have any characters? Aren't enhancements useless? And that would be a pretty good question. This new edition introduces the upgrade tag on some enhancements, which means that they can be applied to up to 3 non-character units, while only counting as a single choice, though you will need to pay their points cost individually. So you heard it here, folks. Yes, fellow greenskins. You can now use enhancements on non-character units as long as they have the upgrade tag. So imagine you can put Follow Me Lads on a squad of knobs, a 20-man squad of boys, and a 10-man squad of flash kids. Yeah, you would have to pay an extra 20, 15, 25 points, whatever it is, for each of those units. But now all of them gets benefit from that enhancement. Again, it adds complexity, intrigue, and interest when building your army. Is this going to be good? I don't fucking know. Depends on what has the upgrade tag. But just having that as an extra option, especially if you regularly find yourself at 1980 points and you need something to spend 20 points on, and you don't have a character to throw an enhancement on, well, maybe you can throw it on a normal unit. Very nice. Lots more options. We always love that. Alright, so with the mission play changes, so when I mentioned with the dispositions that you have depending on your detachment, so how it will work is you will pick one of your detachments that use running in your army, and you will choose that as your main detachment. And whatever the disposition that main detachment is labeled as will be what your army is considered for the battle or the tournament or whatever it is he's playing. So again, say I'm playing Warhorde and Warhorde is a Purge the Foe coded detachment, then my army is considered Purge the Foe for a primary. And my opponent, this is the perfect example. So if my opponent again is playing Tactics Brigade, and that is a, say, Disruption coded detachment, then we're going to compare them to, because this table is what is going to determine what your mission's going to be. If a Purge the Foe player is playing against a Disruption player, well, then this is the primary mission that you're going to play, at least if you are the Purge the Foe player. Because this is called Punishment, the primary mission for the Purge the Foe player, specifically when their opponent is the Disruption detachment. So it says here, start of your turn, select 1 to 3 enemy units that are on the battlefield and with a range of objectives and or that destroyed one or more friendly units in the previous turn. If you cannot select one enemy unit that is on the battlefield at the start of your next turn, those units are condemned. You get 5 VP at the end of a turn if one or more condemned enemy units left the battlefield this turn, which is important. It says left the battlefield means if they just go back into reserve, you still get the points for it. Second battle round onwards, at the end of your command phase or at the end of your turn in the 5th battle round, you get 4 victory points if you control one or more objectives, excluding your home. 5 victory points if you control more objectives than your opponent. And then 8 at the end of the battle if you control your opponent's home objective. So this is what the Purge player is going to try to do as a primary mission for that particular game. This is how they score points. Now the Disruptor player will have a different card that has different primary objectives on it. And this is the big kicker when it comes to playing games in the new edition, because it's all based off this weird table of what's your detachment's goal versus what your opponent's detachment's goal is. So the Purge player versus the Disruptor player is always going to have this same primary card being played. The only thing that changes is the terrain layout. G-Dub has come out and said that each pair of missions, meaning each pair of players' mission, will have 3 different layout options to use for their games. Here's another example. So this is the Disruptor player. It's called Death Trap Primary Mission. So they are going to use the Death Trap Primary specifically if they's playing against a Green Git. Who's the Green Git? The Green Git is a Take and Hold detachment-led army. So it says at the end of your turn, you get 2 victory points for each terrain area trapped this turn, which looks like it's an action over here. So you do the booby trap action. Says start. No, it just says your shooting phase. 1 friendly unit within range of 1 objective, excluding your home objective, or within 1 terrain area that is not within your deployment zone that you have not yet trapped. Use limit is unlimited. Each unit that starts its action this phase must be within a different terrain area, completes immediately, so not at the end of your turn, which is interesting. Effect that terrain area is trapped, place 1 of your operation markers within that terrain area. And then back in the primary mission here, it seems you get 2 victory points each time you do that, with an additional 3 victory points of 5 total, since it's cumulative, for each of the terrain areas that is an objective. Also, any battle round at the end of your turn, 1 or more enemy units that started the turn within a terrain area was destroyed. If the terrain area was trapped, that gets you 3 victory points. And then the second battle round onwards, at the end of your command phase, or at the end of the turn in the 5th battle round, you get 4 victory points if you control 1 or more objectives, excluding your home. So again, if you are a Disruptor player playing against a Take and Hold player, this is always going to be the mission that you're going to play. So this is where the downside comes into this whole like narrative play that G-Dub is trying to come up with. So it sounds very flavorful. If you are a Disruptor type detachment army where you don't want to just purge or take and hold or do reconnaissance, whatever it is, you know, they bring up in the article, oh, well, it doesn't make sense that Khorne Berserkers would be hiding in the corners of the battlefield doing actions, or it wouldn't make sense if Tau Fire Warriors or Pathfinders were gonna charge valiantly into battle versus Chaos Possessed or Demons or whatever it is to try to steal objectives in the middle of the table. It doesn't make sense for them units to do that, so we'd rather come up with some sort of different primary mission like a death trap or a punishment, so that way your units or your armies can play the way that you want them to play. Sounds great, right? Well, in my experience, so for instance, I have a fellow war boss that I play games with semi-regularly. Usually we like to play about once a month. And this Git of mine loves his Necrons. He's been playing Necrons almost exclusively lately. And he always plays, I believe it's called Canoptic Core. It has to do with all the Cryptech and Canoptic units. And he runs the same list every time. That's what he enjoys, that's what he has painted. He has a lot of fun with it. Now lately, I've been playing some of the Fishy Gits in Tau, and I've been having a lot of fun with them. I've been playing the Monk Car Detachment. So whenever me as the Tau player and my fellow Git as the Necron player meet up for a game, we just roll one of the random ones off of the Tournament Companion. The Leviathan deck, or no, it's not even the Leviathan deck anymore. It's just called like the Tournament deck or whatever. But that deck has 20 different mission types. I believe there's 10 different missions, and then 10 different G-Dub terrain layouts for 20 different options. So I can play 20 different games with this Necron Git and not play the same mission twice, be it either the primary is different or the terrain layout's different. Now the difference with this new system is if I'm playing Montcar and I go, okay, well, I am a reconnaissance army, and the Necron player goes, alright, well, I'm a take and hold army, or here, for ease of access, I'll say I am a Disruptor army and my opponent's a take and hold army. That means I am always going to be doing this death trap mission, and my opponent is always going to be doing whatever it is their green card's going to be for that game. And the only difference is what the terrain layout's going to be. And even then, there's only 3 different layouts per mission. So now me and this Necron Git, if we meet up, can only play 3 different missions, when in reality it's just the same mission but with a different terrain type. So it's only 3 different missions before that's it. We just have to start redoing stuff. Now, I feel like this could get stale really zogging quickly. Now you could say, oh, well, just don't have your army be reconnaissance. Just run a different detachment that is purge the foe or something like that. Or if you're running multiple detachments and reconnaissance has just been your main one, well then swap it over to disruptors or something like that. Yeah, you could, but who's to say that that's the way I want my army to play? Maybe I built my list specifically for a lot of my gits to be able to do this booby trap objective, and it works pretty well, so maybe I don't want to do that. So you know what I mean? I feel like it could get stale pretty quick. That's just my opinion. There's an added blurb here. So primaries are all goofed up with these new cards. It does say that tactical objectives, which is your secondary deck, there's a big change though. Instead of only having 2 at any given time, now you'll draw 2 objective cards every turn and keep hold of the ones you haven't scored yet. So you don't need to worry about an early draw scuppering? Really? Scuppering your late game plans. So again, this is another quality of life change. So with the tactical secondary deck as it exists now, sometimes you can just get screwed over by bad draws in the first 1 or 2 turns. If you go turn 1 and the opponent has just hidden behind every single building, nothing's exposed, you can't shoot anything, and you flip those 2 cards over and you get no prisoners and assassinate, and you go, well, there's no way I'm doing either of these. Say you're playing orcs and you go, alright, and well, my grots got me an extra CP off of my back objective, so I can't even ditch one of these cards to get an extra CP. I just have to ditch it and just take the loss of not being able to achieve that secondary later in the game, just so that way I can pull a new card for next turn, to hopefully be able to achieve that in turn 2. Well, with the new tactical objective rules and how they changed, if you pull Assassinate No Prisoners turn 1, and you don't need an extra CP, or say you already got it from, again, Grots, or Leontis, or Emotech, or Azrael, any of them gets, and you can just hold on to those objectives, and probably score them later down the line, later in the game. Now, they do say that there is a limit as to how many points you can get from tactical objectives each turn. I believe it's 15, and they only have that in there so that way you can't just hoard all of your tactical objectives for the first 3 turns, and then turn 4, turn 5, just score like 5 objectives each, and just sneak out with a win at the end of the game. They made it very apparent that you can't do that. So they did think of it, which is good. Good thinking on G-Dub. Well, I like this. The primary missions with the low amount of layouts and the fact that you're always going to play that mission depending on what your matchup is, I'm a little down on. But again, I do like the flavor. And typically I do play different detachments and armies a lot, so I don't think I personally will find myself playing the same mission over and over again. But I can definitely see other gits, typically casual gits, who only really get, again, like 1 game in a month. I see them gits playing specific missions a lot. Alright, so now we got on to rumored rules changes. So this, as well as the following rules, you'll see a lot of gits have been discussing different leaks and whatnot on Discords and YouTube comment sections and Twitch streams, live reaction, all these other different kinds of gits. I'm sure you've seen your Tactical Tortoises talk about it, your Mordian Glories talk about it, all these other different gits. So these ones and onward take with a big old grain of salt, but if any of these sources are to be believed, this could very well be how the game changes in the next edition. So first up here, it says that there's changes to the charge moves. They must end base to base, or end the move as close as possible to the unit used charged. So I have a weird little funky diagram here that I made up using all these gits, the blueberries and us boys. So this is how the rule works currently. So say I've got my 5 boys here, and we've got 3 intercessors and one of them Lancer tank gits over here far off doing its own thing. Now me, I go, alright, well I want to charge into these intercessors, but I also want to lock up this tank. So how am I going to do that? So as it would currently is I would declare a charge into these intercessors, say it's like a 7 or something, I don't know. So I roll my 7, I charge the intercessors, and I start moving my boys into combat with them. So what I do is the first 3 gits I would base to base, just like so, and then these 2 other gits say that a 7-inch move is not enough distance for them to get into base to base contact with these intercessors. Because that's clause 1, when you go to do your charge move, if you can move into base to base contact, you have to. But if you can't get into base to base contact, now the second clause comes into effect, that being your git can move anywhere as long as they finish their charge move closer to the unit that you charged. In addition to all the other pleasantries, being you have to stay within coherency, you have to stay outside of engagement range of units you did not declare as a charge, so on and so forth. So I've positioned this git over here, not touching this Blueberry Marine, and this git over here, still closer to the Space Marines than when he started way back here, but in this case, real close to this big Lancer tank. So then that way, once I went to my ensuing fight phase and I selected these boys to attack, I would pile in this git towards this Blueberry Marine because he is closer, but then this git would pile into the tank because the tank was closer than him. Because when you do your piling moves, you move 3 inches towards the nearest possible model. And then if that piling gets you within engagement range of an enemy unit, you can then swing against them. So now that means if these 4 gits, whether they kill these Blueberry Marines or not, I still achieve my goal of locking up this Lancer tank. Meaning it's not going to shoot next turn, or if it does, it's taking that -1 for Big Guns Never Tire. So thus, the goal was achieved. But now, with this rumored new rule change, let's go back. So again, it says charge moves must end base to base or end move as close as possible to the unit you charged. So in this case, if I charged the intercessors and it was a 7-inch charge, I would charge them, that is what would end up. So again, those first 3 gits end in base to base contact with these blueberries, but the back 2, again with a 7, does not get them within base to base. So then, again, the next part of this clause interrupts, saying if you cannot get to base, you have to end as close as possible to the unit you charged. Meaning no more taking any sidewinders, anything like that. You gotta take shortcuts straight to your destination. Go as close to these gits as humanly possible, or as orcally possible in our case. Call it a day. So now, even if my gits kill these blueberries, there might not be a short enough distance for us to get into this tank. Or if we don't kill the blueberries, well then we're just stuck here and this tank's able to be free and do whatever it is he wants to do anyways. So that's a big change. Again, one less trick that gits can't do in combat anymore, if this is true. It's very interesting. Alright, next up, rumored rules change. Engagement range in melee is moving to within 2 inches instead of only 1 inch. Now, I can see why they'd want to implement this, and I feel like that's to try to get rid of the gaminess of the 1 inch outside of a ruined wall rule that just about any competitive git with assault uses and abuses. And what that rule is it basically means because of engagement range being 1 inches, it means that if you has a git lined up right up against the wall of a terrain piece or the wall of a ruin, that means your opposing git on the other team could charge your unit, and as long as their gits ended up against the wall, right up against the wall on the other side, well then they'd be within 1 inch of your boys on the inside, therefore within engagement range, therefore their charge was successful, meaning that they can now punch your gits up. So to avoid this, when you're moving your gits into a building, you just make sure that they're at least 1 inch off of the wall. So now if your opposing gits tries to charge these lads, they go, alright, well, if you get all the way up to the other side of the wall of the ruin, well, you're going to be more than 1 inch out of my gits. Because I am 1 inch away from the wall, and then the wall is an undescript amount of thickness. Usually it's probably just 1/4 inch, but that is more than 1 inch, meaning that you can no longer charge them gits from the other side of the wall. If you want to charge them, engage them in melee, you got to go all the way around the terrain piece to get to them lads inside. It's a very gamey maneuver. A lot of people don't like it. It ruins their immersion, all that whatnot. But it's what the rules say, and it's what every git in competitive knows to do. So if engagement range is 2 inches now, that means that it will be very hard to do that same maneuver if you are inside a building. It means if you are anywhere even close to a wall, you can be charged from the other side of it. That's what that means. But it also means other things. It means when you use deep strike, now your deep strike charges are 8 inches instead of 9 inches because you get that extra inch of freebie off of the engagement range of whatever it is he's trying to fight. And I feel like that's an interesting change because especially since they're not trying to change up a lot of the core, they're not trying to change up a lot of the codexes and all of their rules, stratagems, enhancements, and all that other gets. Because there's a lot of rules and a lot of enhancement stratagems in the game that say when you move within 9 inches, you get to do something. You get to blood surge, you get to reactive move, you get to overwatch, you get to teleport, you get to do all these different things. But if engagement range is 2 inches, that means you can still have the deep strike rule be outside of 9 inches. But melee armies still get to feel more powerful because now instead of making a 9-inch charge that the odds are have to CP reroll and still fail, now they can try to make an 8-inch charge, CP reroll, and potentially fail. So deep strike charges coupled with the roll what you charge before you charge rule, again makes armies very, very profitable in this edition. Melee armies seems like they're getting a lot of help in 11th edition, and they'll get even more help here when we get to something later. But yeah, if this, I don't know if I like the 2-inch engagement range, just because it makes units bubbles that you have to avoid a lot more difficult. It makes blood surges even more insane, because now that like if it's a D6 blood surge, it's like a D6 plus 2 now because of engagement range. But yeah, it'd be a huge shakeup. Alright, next up, rule change. Units that can fly or have the fly keyword can completely ignore terrain pieces at a penalty of -2 inches to your movement. So currently how fly works in the game is if you want to fly over walls or ruins or whatever it have you have to do some geeky Pythagorean theorem, Hume bullshit to figure out how much movement you're gonna need to get up and over. So with my crude little diagram here, this Bloodthirster is a monster, so it cannot just go straight through walls, straight through terrain like infantry can. So if it wants to get a charge off into this Lancer, it doesn't want to just go around, because we'll say that, I don't know, this is an infinitely long crate here, and it's also huge, a lot huger than typical GW crates. But yeah, so say that this Bloodthirster git has to go 3 inches up to get to the top of the crate, 2 inches over to clear the top of the crate, and then another 3 inches down to get off of the crate, to then be able to land somewhere in this area to be able to then declare a charge into the Gladiator. You see what I mean? This is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches worth of movement that this Bloodthirster has to give up just to be able to get to the other side of this big box. I don't know how fast Bloodthirsters move, but I can't imagine it's more than 10 or 12 inches. So hopefully that's enough distance to get you into a good charge range of that Lancer, because otherwise, again, you're going to be stuck out in the open, waiting for some kid to shoot you to bits. So with Fly, you can just take a -2 and go straight through it. And if we look again at this diagram back here, we are saving 6 inches worth of movement by just flying straight through it. This is going to be huge for, again, monsters, vehicles, walkers, any other big gits that struggle to move around the table that have fly. Hell, unfortunately, Catans are going to love this. Greater Demons are going to love this, or at least the ones that can fly, the Bird and the Bloodthirster. So yeah, this is a very interesting one. I think this would be fine. I mean, again, it's just a quality of life change. It makes it to where you don't have to do all the awkward measuring. This one would be nice. I won't lie. Alright, another rumored rules change. The change in terrain affecting to hit rolls rather than the save will give you -1 ballistic skill if shooting in a cover. So this is another rumored rule change. So cover, currently in 10th edition, gives you +1 to your armor save. It is rumored that, well actually I think it is confirmed, they said in the reveal show, that cover will now be affecting your hit rolls. They just didn't specify what they meant by that. Now, the leaks are saying that it is going to affect your ballistic skill. You will have -1 ballistic skill if you are shooting a unit in cover. And that is huge. That is another big indirect buff to melee armies because shooting armies are not going to enjoy this. Tau hit on 4s, they don't like it. Admech hit on 4s, they don't like this. Guard hits on 4s, they don't like this. Orcs hit on 5s. -1 ballistic skill means we are hitting half as worse if we're shooting on 5s. Yeah, so this is a huge shakeup, especially for orcs. If this means that all orcs are going to be running around shooting on 6s, it's going to be rough. I'm glad that we are the launchbox faction, which means that we're going to get our codex rather quickly. So I'm hoping that they implement some sort of rule to help remedy this, if this is what cover actually will mean in 11th edition. Like for orcs, like you could bring back like the Daka rule from previous editions. That basically just said anytime you rolled a 6 to hit, you got an additional hit. So effectively just give sustained hits to every single gun in the army. Which, oh no, give orcs sustained hits, make some broken, Daka all over again, PTSD, I know, sustained hits on orcs is scary, but you'd have to do something. You can't just have an entire army worth of kits hidden on 6s all the zogging time. All orcs are a melee army. Why you running shooting lads? You're not supposed to be doing that. You play orcs, you play Warhorde, you play them in Purge the Foe. You play this one dinky primary mission against anybody in the game. Well, I for one won't stand for that. I'm gonna run me shooting gits, and I want my shooting gits to be very good. Hell, they showed off the big gun walker thing in the reveal trailer. There's no way that thing's not gonna be good, so that way people don't run out and buy 5 of them. So there's gotta be some way to remedy this. But on a positive note, terrain movement and -1 ballistic skill means that AP1 guns finally mean something again, lads. Throughout the entirety of 10th edition, AP1 weapons have been utter zogging garbage. As if you think about it, a Space Marine Beaky Intercessor over here has a 3-up armor save. So if you fire an AP0 weapons at him, he's going to have a 3-up save. If you put the Intercessor in cover, it's got +1 to its armor save. You fire AP0 weapons at it, he's still going to have a 3-up armor save because terrain specifically cannot up your armor save past a 3+. But say you're firing flash kits at this lad. AP1 in cover means AP0, so again he's just getting a 3-up armor save. In 10th edition, terrain makes it to where it's so zogging easy to gain the benefits of cover, you're almost surprised if a unit won't get cover. So that's the same in 11th, and everything's got -1 ballistic skill cover running around, then AP1 weapons, they're gonna be back in the zogging menu. Looters, flash kits, hell, the buggies, the Daka Jet, all of these really zogging trash units because they have just such low AP. Orcs as an army just in general has low AP. They have a big AP problem. So yeah, we're gonna be shooting on 6s. But if we hit them 6s, we're gonna be killing a lot more lads than we were in this edition with shooting. So I'm skeptical of it, and my knee-jerk reaction is that this is gonna be awful, but silver lining, lads, silver lining. Alright, next rumored rules change. Terrain is becoming more dense, at least with the G-dub layouts. WTC style terrain is becoming the norm. So as you can see on the left here, this is a G-dub terrain format. So you see if you count it up, it's got 12 different pieces of terrain here. And in the middle, it is rather sparse. You have these really long line of sights where you can see into the opponent's deployment zone. In the middle is just these 2 little small bricks. It's very difficult to hide anything. in the center here. Lots of big open areas for lots of shooting. Now this is on the WTC terrain over here. Now this also has 12 terrain pieces, but the terrain pieces are all very, very large, with only 2 of the small ones. Versus on the G-Dub layout, you have, 4 smalls, 2 mediums, and the rest are large. Here you've got 2 smalls and the rest are large. So it takes up a lot more space, and it's a lot more cluttered on the WTC boards. Now, I'm in the US. US tournaments, pretty much nationwide, almost exclusively use the G-Dub tournament layouts and formats. So I've never played in an official event, or really even any pickup games, using WTC style terrain. It looks cool, it looks unique. I mean, I'm tired of playing the G-Dub equivalent ones, so I might just try some of these out in some casual games just for shits and giggles. But at a competitive level, certain armies would love to play on this table, the WTC one, rather than the G-Dub one. And then certain armies would of course prefer the G-Dub over the WTC. And this is where I got confused, because I'm like, well, over in Europe and other countries in the world, they primarily use the WTC/UKTC terrain formats. And over here in the West, we use G-Dub formats. So if that's the case, where these 2 formats are so drastically different, where one layout vastly favors shooting versus one vastly favors melee, I am very surprised at G-Dub's capability of being able to even somewhat balance the game as a whole. Because Orcs or World Eaters is going to be leagues better on WTC than G-Dub. So you would think that Orcs would have a much higher win rate percentage in European circuits than they would in American circuits. And then if you're G-Dub and you see, alright, well, American Orc armies are at like a 44% win rate, but European Orc armies are at a 56% win rate, what do you do at that point? Well, we can't buff the army, or else the WTC format's going to go crazy. Well, we can't nerf the army anymore, or else the GW formats are going to go crazy. So I'm interested as to how G-Dub did this before, but I like what they're doing now, because it sounds like they're adapting to this new WTC terrain format and solidifying it as their own terrain format and making it to where if you're going to run an event, you have to use G-Dub's tournament formats, which I feel will be very good for the health of the game in terms of how G-Dub will be able to respond to the player base, listen to complaints, listen to concerns, listen to ideas, and buff or nerf or change the game accordingly. A lot of people are shitting on this. They're like, why the hell you gotta go after WTC? Why the hell G-Dub going after UKTC? Why can't we just play what we want and not confine to G-Dub's bullshit, whatever the fuck they's doing with their terrain formats? That's what a lot of people are saying. But I, for one, welcome this change. Oh, and that's another thing. Since terrain is also becoming more dense, they said. So currently both of these have 12 different terrain pieces on them. Apparently, so even on the WTC formats, because the leaks are saying that these WTC layouts are very similar to what the final product is going to be for 11th edition in terms of the new layouts. So that means they's going to have, instead of 12 different pieces of terrain, they're going all the way up to 16. And it's going to be as cluttered, or if not more cluttered, than these WTC formats. Plus, there's going to have different shaped terrain templates as well. Instead of everything being a big boxy rectangle, they're going to include some triangles. They're going to include some really oblong looking rectangles. For instance, they have confirmed, in the rumors at least, that 10 by 2 inch skinny rectangles will be a new terrain template to be used in 11th edition. And that's pretty zogging crazy in my opinion. That's just gonna be what, like one big long barricade? I don't zogging know. Even the small armored crates that you put on both formats are like 4 inches wide, or like 6. So these are like smaller but longer. I don't zogging know, lads. It's gonna be a huge shakeup. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm abrasive towards some things, but overall, I welcome change. I'm ready for a mix-up. I think it's gonna be loads of zogging fun, lads. And yeah, so with that, that's all the info I got for you, lads. Lots of leaks out there, lots of official things. G-Dub is posting new articles every day, it seems like, at least during the week, going over all the new different changes and whatnot. This is just what I have available in terms of info for me right now. Next weekend, I'll probably try to make another video based on everything that Dave's going to go over in the upcoming week, because I'm sure it'll be a lot. And I, for one, am very excited, lads. I'm really excited to see the new contents of the new box. I'm really excited for when WASDACA comes out. The future's looking green. It really is, lads. It is now. If you are hesitating getting into Warhammer, or at the very least getting into the Orcs, now is a great time, lads. Split the box with a fellow Marine player. There's millions of them, so it should be easy to find somebody who will split a box. Or at the very least, loads of Space Marine players are going to be trying to sell their Orc halves for cheap, and that'll happen. That'll go on for like the first good year, maybe year and a half of the edition. You'll be able to find that new launch box that the Armageddon gets for very cheap, and I highly suggest you pick some up, because Orcs are the funnest army that I've played in Warhammer, period, and that's over the course of multiple editions. I love their lore, I love their models, and I love to see what these kits are going to turn into with 11th edition. And with that, lads, thank you all for watching. Sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded. Things have just been slow. Again, end of 10th edition, not a lot going on. They came out with a couple rules updates, actually. They did like an official balanced data slate, which had nothing for the Orcs. And then they did a stealth update just a few days ago, and they changed the freebooter crew to happening into the command phase now, like it should have. The detachment rule, that is. So that's nice. I don't think it changed the needle on anything. But, you know what I mean? There's just not a lot of exciting things, at least when it comes to the greenskins, the 10th edition. Everything is full bore and into the abyss for 11th already. It's coming out in June, and rumor is like early June, like end of May, early June. So we'll see, lads. We will see. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, that's all I got for you. With that, this has been the Daily Krumper. Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe. Do all the pleasantries. Have a good one.